The head of the snake is the financial system.
Europe will not survive.
Hello. If you're somewhat interested in politics, you will quickly realize a lot of people throw a lot of terms around, and in many cases it is quite unclear what those words actually mean. A serious definition is oftentimes difficult to find. Good examples for this type of problem would be words like fascism, communism, Marxism, socialism, or capitalism. If you want to have some fun, ask your favorite leftist or conservative, what is the difference between Marxist socialism and National Socialism? You will quickly learn how often people use words without any solid idea what the real meaning might be. Also, you might notice people tend to define words from a specific angle, based on their own ideology and preferences. I hate to say it, but that's perfectly fine. Complex ideologies like fascism or capitalism are often easier to define from a specific point of view. The attempt to define them in universal terms is often futile, because it becomes much too complex and complicated to cover all aspects the term can have. In this video I want to present some definitions of capitalism I have come across over time. In my eyes, every of them is legitimate and can be helpful at times. Let's begin with a non-definition. If you refer to a popular source like Wikipedia, you will find a confusing non-definition. They create a lot of flavors, with constructs like state capitalism, welfare capitalism, free market capitalism, and the like. Also, they talk a lot about certain tools which are often associated with capitalism, like stock exchange or privately owned means of production. But all of this is confusing at best and misleading at worst. You can spend a lot of time studying all the symptoms of capitalism, but at the end of the day the question remains, what is capitalism? Other approaches are certainly more charming than this. Now let's go for the clickbait title. The racist's definition of capitalism is straightforward. From a racist's point of view, capitalism is simply when Jews own the bank or hold disproportionate power within banking and finances. The racist will argue, every people deserves self-determination, self-governance and sovereignty. Therefore, no alien group must be allowed to wield such power over a foreign nation. It becomes especially bad if the Jews have the central bank under their control. Now the alien group controls the money supply itself. From a racist point of view, this is a serious infringement on the sovereignty of a people and therefore constitutes the evil heart of capitalism. Very simple. The deceiver's definition of capitalism. Who could be a more famous deceiver than Mr. Karl Marx himself? He defines capitalism as private property and privately owned means of production. This justifies in his eyes the continuous struggle of the poor against the middle class, which owns property or the means of production. In order to solve the problem, he proposes a very radical approach and suggests to abolish the concept of property completely. The teachings of Marx are deeply deceptive for three main reasons. Number one, Marx talks remarkably little about the construct of money itself. Money is a social construct, or more precisely, a socio-economic construct, which is to say, we can change it at will as soon as we decide to do so. The way how a society constructs money and currency will have a huge impact on the resulting economy. Currently, money is created out of debt. Money could also be created out of work, or out of gold, or it could simply have a spawn rate. Obviously, the most enlightened approach would be to use several of those methods and adjust them depending on the current needs of your economy. Also, it is important who is in control of this mechanism, as the racist definition demonstrated so nicely. So this would be a deception by omission. His second deception is way more overt. He equates property, or the means of production, with capital and capitalism. Somehow he fails to explain to you how property and capital are polar opposites. Of course they are interchangeable. If you own capital, you can certainly buy property, and if you own means of production, you can use them to earn a lot of capital. But this doesn't change a simple fact. Property is a value, while money, or currency, represents a value. The one is only a representation, while the other is a real thing. The attempt to make you believe they are one and the same thing is fraudulent and will inevitably mislead you. The third deception is encapsulated in his proposed solution: the abolition of private-owned property. Mysteriously, he doesn't mention how property can never go away and ownership can therefore never be abolished. Think about a piece of land with a house on it. Even if nobody owns this property on paper, the property itself doesn't go away. And sure as hell, someone exists who has the power to decide what happens with this piece of land and the house. This power to decide is in return the real definition of ownership. Technically, it doesn't matter whether the decision is made by a private owner or a commissar of the political elite. The reason why Marx, the great deceiver, uses such a fraudulent definition of capitalism is astonishingly simple. He's a revolutionary. Unrealistic expectations and fraudulent ideologies are perfect tools for revolutionaries. The death toll and misery communism has brought about since he introduced it proves him right. From this perspective, his definition makes perfect sense. The autistic definition of capitalism. Like the racist definition, this is straightforward and short. The autist will only concern himself with technicalities. He will say, if money is created out of debt and usury is applied in form of interest and compound interest, then the end result will be an advanced form of slavery, since the state is forced to plunder the citizens via taxation to pay for the debt. Debt slavery equals capitalism. I personally feel this definition has a lot of merit. The simplicity makes it easy to explain, and it can be applied to any form of society. By this definition, a multicultural or multiracial hellhole is just as capitalistic as a homogeneous society, and a communist hellhole can also easily fall into this category. You can use it to annoy retarded leftists by pointing out their communist paradise is just capitalism without the benefits. I personally enjoy this. The postmodernist definition of capitalism. If you are willing to read Francis Parker Yockey and his seminal work Imperium, you will find yourself confronted with a colorful character. Oftentimes Yockey approaches reality based on feelings, emotions, and intuition. We see this behavior as a typical left-wing trait. At the same time, he has obvious traditionalist attitudes. In his eyes, people have a distinct biospirit and are destined to fulfill their biospirit with the creation of a distinct civilization. The ideas of destiny and the biospirit inherent to a certain type of people is very traditional in nature. But at the same time, an unstoppable progressivism is ingrained into this idea, which again is a left-wing trait. Finally, you will find him on the far right side of things. He is very disappointed with the liberal forces standing victorious in World War II. In his eyes, we should have overcome the old and deprecated paradigms of modernity back then. Forces like fascism and National Socialism should have won the war and paved the way for a new Europe and a new civilization for Europeans. The outcome of World War II is, in his opinion, a reason for sorrow, since we are now forced into the twilight between the deprecated old modernity and the inevitable new era we are destined to create. There is a lot of merit to this observation. Our dystopian civilization feels indeed like a twilight. That's why I opted to call him a postmodernist. I cannot classify him as traditionalist, far-right or progressive without contradictions. But his burning desire to overcome modernity and march into the famous land of tomorrow is indisputable. When it comes to capitalism, Yockey makes an interesting remark. He says capitalism only becomes a thing after society has seen an industrial revolution. That's a very smart observation. An agrarian environment has little use for capital. All you need is a few animals and a handful of seeds. From there you can produce and multiply your animals and seeds without further capital. In a worst-case scenario, you could even catch wild animals and collect wild seeds and begin the process of domestication yourself. Once you have technology, this changes dramatically. Now you need a huge amount of money to invest before you can start any sort of production. It is this point in your civilization where certain money-related tools like a stock exchange become relevant to finance industrial installations. In this framework, capitalism is defined as the convergence of money or currency, bank, and technology. Capitalist structures might pre-exist the Industrial Revolution, but only after the Industrial Revolution they become a thing. The fascist definition of capitalism. Whenever I listen to fascists, I'm touched how romantic those people are. They talk about the metaphysical and absolute values like honor, beauty, and strength. Even though I have a pronounced romantic attitude myself, as you can easily tell from my background pictures, I found it always strange to use this as an angle from which to approach politics and economics. At last, until I stumbled across a fascist who defined capitalism for me from his point of view. Unfortunately, I do not recall who it was. It might have been Sir Oswald Mosley or maybe De Rivera. De Rivera the son, obviously, not the father. The fascists defined capitalism as a state of mind, as a spiritual, moral, ideological value system of a society in which capital is more important than beauty, honor, strength, and integrity. And especially when a society values profit higher than human well-being. Okay, now it makes perfect sense. If you believe your problem is spiritual in nature and expresses itself in form of a rotten value system, then the preaching of a better value system for your society is indeed the cure. I personally believe preaching alone will not be enough. I think we should also aim to change the mechanism of our monetary system fundamentally. But meanwhile, it seems plausible to me to preach morals and ideology, because this can change the perception and create a consciousness for the problem. With this groundwork being done, it might be easier to make the necessary changes. Also, the fascist way of seeing it provides a neat way to explain the problem to simple-minded people. The message, capitalism is simply a consequence of moral decay, is far easier to communicate than complex economic theories. That's clearly a huge advantage. So, with this I say, thank you for being with me, and be well, wherever you are.